So we've been doing a series on discipleship, what it means to be a disciple of Jesus. And so each week we've been focusing on a different facet, and tonight we're going to focus on community. So I'm going to pray. Well, yeah, I'm just going to pray quickly for myself, and then we can start talking about it. Yeah, Jesus, thank you for tonight. I just pray that you would be with us, that we would receive from you your love, that you would give us good things tonight, that you would make space in our heart to listen, to hear your voice, and to receive from you. Pray this in your name, amen. Since the 1950s, church attendance has been cut in half. And it's easy to make assumptions about that and to think, well, that's because of the rise in secularism and just the church behaving badly in the eyes of the culture. But interestingly, it's not just church that's been cut in half. It's actually all forms of community that require any kind of commitment have drastically decreased. So the Elks Lodge, parent teachers associations, which was surprising to me because there's like helicopter parents and overly invested parents, that's been cut in half. Union memberships, community theater groups, like bowling leagues, like every kind of community activity that requires commitment is in the decline. And not surprisingly, rates of loneliness have also doubled in the US since the 1980s. So 30% of Americans reported that they are chronically lonely. In 1984, the average American had 3 confidants, like close friends. And in a recent report, 25% of Americans reported having 0 confidants or friends, close friends. In 2019, only 8% of Americans said that they had a conversation with their neighbor. Just like, yeah. So clearly, I don't think we're meant to live this way, right? Loneliness has been tied to anxiety and depression. Research published in the Oxford Research Encyclopedias in 2017 found that people who feel lonely are more likely to suffer from heart disease, declines in motor function, frailty, and dementia. In 2017, the former US Surgeon General, Vivek Murthy, wrote, "During my years caring for patients, the most common pathology I saw was not heart disease or diabetes, it was loneliness." Murthy called the condition a growing health epidemic and pointed to research showing that loneliness and weak social connections are associated with a reduction in lifespan, similar to that caused by smoking 15 cigarettes a day, and even greater than that associated with obesity. I just listened to this segment on the podcast, This American Life, and they followed this documentary filmmaker from Portland, Oregon, and she had this like kind of spunky older grandma named Dee who liked to wear tie-dye and loved turquoise jewelry. Over the course of her lifespan, she was a AA sponsor to over 100 people. So just vivacious, outgoing, full of life. She moved into a long-term care center 5 years ago just because she had some mild dementia. And for 4 years, she had family members or her best friends. They'd basically come and visit her every day and take her for outings, and they'd go out for brunch and all of this stuff. And then COVID hit, and she suddenly wasn't allowed to see anyone. She wasn't able to do group dining or any of the social activities in her care facility. And so her family was like, we will make sure that there is someone from our family will make sure to call her at least once every day, so that at least every day she will get a phone call, right? And so this documentary filmmaker was recording some of her conversations, and just over 3 months, it was crazy. You could hear like her rapid decline. Like in the beginning, she went from talking about her day and like reminiscing about the past to 3 months later, being very confused when her granddaughter would call her, not knowing who her granddaughter was, And then she like didn't even know what the phone was, you know, like she was like just very confused about the noise that it was making. And she ended up passing away 3 weeks before they began to allow visitors again to the nursing homes. And the Alzheimer's Association found that 46,000 more people died from dementia this past year than on average in each of the last 5 years. And they call these excess deaths, people who probably would not have died if it had been a normal year, right? It's because loneliness is not good for us. It's not good for us. It's not good for our health and the quality of our life, right? And so is there a practice in the life of Jesus that has the potential to set us up well to have rich and thriving relationships in a culture that is just like marked by loneliness? So we're going to take a look at several brief scenes from the Gospel of Matthew, and they will kind of form our conversation. So the first one I will read, and we're not going to spend a ton of time talking about it or reflecting, but I have a question for us. So this is Matthew 4:18-22. As Jesus was walking beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw two brothers, Simon called Peter and his brother Andrew. They were casting a net into the lake, for they were fishermen. "Come follow me," Jesus said, "and I will send you out to fish for people." At once they left their nets and followed him. Going on from there, he saw two older brothers, James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John, and they were in a boat with their father Zebedee preparing their nets. Jesus called them, and immediately they left the boats and their father and followed him. Okay. So it's a short passage, and it might seem a little bit random for the topic. But what observations can you make about community from this little passage? And folks online can share, of course, also.
A question I'm having is, these are the first four people that he invites, right? And they're both brothers, and so there's like I'd never noticed that before, and it seems like maybe there's like a built-in safety of doing it with your brother, because I mean, like, you've grown up knowing this person forever, and so like they're like Jesus maybe wanting to start from a base of like community, like these people already know each other deeply, and I'm gonna invite both of them. And then the other thing is, like, it just changes, because I've usually thought of it as an individual choice, like follow Jesus, but it's like follow Jesus with my brother. And I know they weren't all brothers, that you like all 12 weren't, but there's still that's probably not accident. The first two brother bears.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Folks online, could you hear that a little bit? Could you hear Caleb?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Other thoughts?
Well, since it was in the same general region, and since they had the same profession, they probably already knew each other too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it was like four people that already knew each other and had a commonality in profession and place of dwelling. I think there was purpose.
There was what? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, she was saying that there was purpose in their community because they were following Jesus. Anything else?
There's like risk here.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even if you think of like their sons of Zebedee. Zebedee's in the boat, And Jesus calls the two brothers out of their profession, which is out of how their family makes money, into following him, which, like, who knows how they're gonna like. So like, he's hurting in a sense financially their family's money, and he's also asking them to take a risk in following him. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, totally. It's risky, but there's purpose. There's some commonality because there's brothers. They're living in the same region. Any other thoughts?
Well, I guess like it doesn't really speak to it explicitly, but like as we find out later too, there's like a level of commitment.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, they have to leave everything behind, follow him.
The commitment is kind of like, I think that's like a key aspect of community, because if you don't know if there's going to be other people you rely on.
Yeah.
There's different like roles, and there's community works when there's different people doing different things for each other. It doesn't really work. It's just like one person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. Like, kind of along that line, I mean, maybe this isn't obvious, but when Jesus calls people to himself, when he calls people to follow him, he is calling them into community, right? You can't follow Jesus alone. Like, he does not just call one person. He calls 2 at a time, and then 2 more, and then eventually there's 12, right? And for the next 3 years, they sleep together, they travel together, they do ministry together, they eat together, like they do life together. And then Jesus tells them to go and fish for more people, right? So come and welcome even more people in. So in the very beginning of the Christian story, there's this idea of like what it means to follow Jesus is to live in community, right? Jesus lived a communal life. The call to follow Jesus was simultaneously a call to join community. And I think that can kind of sometimes go against like the way that we kind of want to follow Jesus, right? Yeah, it's like individual. It's my choice. It's this thing I do. I have this special like I pray by myself in my room or whatever it is. But yeah, the way that Jesus modeled it was like you're doing it in community. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You're being asked to leave it. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're going into one, but you're leaving one as far as get much closer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
In the hope that like there's something special about this other community.
Especially when you were viewed as a reject. These guys had not been. They had probably gone to a rabbi before to be in this group, and they said. So now all of a sudden, this rabbi comes by and said, "Hey, join me, take the risk, leave your family, join me."
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think this is important for us because I think there's a lot of ways. I was listening to John Mark Comer talk one time, and he was saying that sometimes we confuse connectivity for community. That we're actually more digitally connected than ever before. Like we have text messaging and Zoom and social media and email, and yet loneliness is on the rise. And they've done numerous studies that have shown that there's a direct correlation between internet usage and loneliness. And one of their theories is that it's easier for us to spend more time liking someone's photo that we met a year ago that lives across the US or messaging someone than we do having face-to-face conversation with a friend, right? And so we confuse connectivity to community. And there was this MIT researcher that wrote something really interesting. She said, face-to-face conversation is the most human and humanizing thing we do. When we're fully present with one another, we learn to listen. It's where we develop the capacity for empathy. It's where we experience the joy of being heard and being understood. And we're actually not meant as humans, we're not wired to know more than 100 or 150 max people, right? Like our brains just like aren't capable of that, and yet we're like connected to so many more people than that, right? I really find it interesting that Jesus, the God of the universe, chose to live and fully invest in 12 people and a couple females. And he probably could have done a lot more because he's like the God of the universe, right? But I think he was modeling something for us as humans, showing us our capacity and what healthy relationship requires, right? Like this like, will you live life with me day in and day out? Okay, so the next one is Matthew 10, 2 through 4. Kanae, do you want to read that?
Jesus called his 12 disciples to him and gave them authority to drive out impure spirits and to heal every disease and sickness. These are the names of the 12 apostles. First, Simon, who was called Peter, and his brother Andrew, James, son of Zebedee, brother John, Philip and Bartholomew, Thomas
Sorry.
and Matthew the tax collector, James, son of Alphaeus and Thaddeus, Simon the Zealot, and Judas Iscariot betrayed.
It's a lot of names.
That's a lot of names.
Well, why would you pick two Jameses and why would you pick two Simons?
I know, it's true. So it's actually this really diverse group of folks, and we don't have time to like talk about all of them, but I did want to look at particular Matthew the tax collector and Simon the Zealot. This is going to be redundant for some of you, but Zealots were basically right-wing Jewish insurgency radical group that would conduct violent kind of terrorist-like activity on Roman soldiers to try to overthrow Roman rule and gain Israel's independence. So you have a zealot, and then you have Matthew, a tax collector, who is a Jewish man working for Rome. So he's taking money from his own people and handing it over to Rome, and probably even pocketing a little extra on the side, right, from his own people. So can you imagine the level of tension that you would have between the zealot who hates Rome and wants to do by any means necessary overthrow Roman rule, and then you have Matthew who's like a puppet, right, for the Roman government. So it's like, this is not the most strategic move for Jesus, right, to have like a good community. There's probably lots of conflict, and it was probably messy and there were hurt egos like all the time. And this is only two people. And then there's like Judas, right, who is off on the side doing all sorts of stuff. So what is Jesus doing here? Like, why is this the kind of community that he chooses to build, right? Because he could have made it easier on himself, I think. So what is he telling us about community? Why is he building this kind of community? Folks online can talk too if you want to.
Eventually, he'll say, "Love your enemy."
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Someone said eventually he says, love your enemy.
Yeah, like a homogenous group is not shocking, but
Mm.
to see the love of God bring together people that should never love each other.
That is super compelling, right? Yeah. To see a pack of like people that don't make any sense together love one another. It's like, what is going on there? Because that's not normally the way that we operate in society, right? We usually pick like the people that are kind of most similar to us, have the same interests, look similar, recreate similar. What else?
Yeah, but I'm also thinking like, deeper than that, maybe he wanted those two people to love each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, and there is a way that when you get up close with somebody who's super different, you start to love them. stop taking on the difference.
Mhm.
Yeah, if these are supposed to be the 12 to then like make disciples of nations, if you're in a group where, you know, if you're all basically the same, it's still easy to kind of hate those people or dislike those people. But once those people are part of your people, that kind of opens up your mind a little bit more to like the differences, and it's okay, I guess. Like, oh, I love you, and so since you represent this other kind of group, then I can let go of some of that tension that I have with this other group, because these are all Jewish guys, right? And at that time, they were still pretty much like, they weren't supposed to eat with like the Gentiles, right? And so if Jesus is then going to call them to go out and preach to all the nations and not just other Jewish people, you need to have this love and appreciation for other types.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that it's like a training ground. I mean, for them, right? Like,
Yeah.
what do
So I know that were you?
No.
Oh, well, it's like the way that they both have to like see the thing about themselves that the other person hates in order to even join the Jesus group, because the thing that the zealot hates about the tax collector is that he's a sellout, and is just got his own interest in mind, but he's losing all that to follow Jesus. Like, he's not selling out anymore, because like the Roman government's not down with what they're doing, right? And then so he obviously has to lose that job, and then the zealot is being taught to love his enemies, and so he can't like be forming insurrections anymore. Like so like yeah the zealot sees that him as a sellout, and then the tax collector sees him as a dangerous radical. They both are like they have to leave those identities behind to find true unity with Jesus. They can't be those things anymore.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts?
This might be just kind of restating what everybody is saying, but it has to be that what we have in common as followers of Jesus is more important than what separates us as in any other metric or way of talking, you know?
Yeah.
And yeah, that means a lot if that actually works out to be true, you know?
Yeah, like they define, I think in the dictionary defines community. I don't have it written down, but it's something like a group of people that share common interests. I think that live in close proximity to one another. I think that might be part of the definition. But yeah, it's like, what do these people have in commonality? Like, they love Jesus. That's the thing that unifies them, right? Like, which is just like really beautiful. And that is the thing, like, that should unify us, right? In Matthew 20, there's the fight that breaks out between the disciples because two of them, like, they're arguing about who gets to sit on Jesus's left side and right side, right, when Jesus builds his new kingdom. And it says that the disciples were indignant. And then Jesus tells them, this is interesting, you know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be your slave. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. So it's like Jesus is saying, like, to be part of this community, you need to be living by, oh, weird. You need to be living by a whole new set of values, right? Like, to live with love and service and the value of the other, like, as the center point for you, right? Not power, not your own personal power or prestige or your own personal desires, right? If the disciples are going to have that at the center, then the whole thing is going to fall apart, right? And so it's easy for us to enter into Christian community thinking about our own needs or what we want. Oftentimes, I think when we're new to a Christian community, we're kind of searching for that spark, like that sense of chemistry. Like, am I going to click with these people? Are they fun? Do they recreate in the same way? Do they like my kind of music? Are they funny? Like, do they like similar books? Do we have similar political views? Like, we're always searching for like our common interests, or if we like someone, right? And the fact that Jesus puts together this mishmash of random people, these disciples, some who would be natural enemies, it leads me to think that if we're solely looking for people we think we click with, when we put our desires, personal desires, always at the center of community, like we might be missing out on the real transformative community that Jesus actually wants to offer us, right? I went to this for 2 years in high school. I went to this like really cool, booming, entertaining like youth group. Like 200 people in San Diego. It was just like all the cool kids. And then I went to this really small liberal arts school where basically no one followed Jesus. And I remember like going to this very, very small Christian community on campus. The first night I got there and I was like, okay, these are going to be my people. And I get in the room and I was just very, very bummed. We went to the same, yeah.
Seriously, this is it?
I really was like, I don't know if this is going to work out for me. At first glance, like it was just clearly a pack of very, very awkward people. So for example, like there was a handful of them that loved playing this game, Animal, Mineral, Vegetable. You guys heard of this? It's like a variation on 20 questions. So it's like, is it an animal, mineral, or vegetable, whatever. And so seriously, these two guys, they like debated for hours whether or not a wooden table could be classified as a vegetable because wood comes from trees, right? And they would argue about this for hours. And they didn't surf, not that I surfed, but you know, like I liked hanging out with surfers, right? They didn't surf, they didn't watch Friends, they didn't care about fashion trends or celebrity gossip. No, but thankfully, I don't know, Jesus like did some work in me and I was like, okay, well, if I'm going to stay Christian, I guess I have to like hang out with these people. But there was a girl named May who helped me finally feel comfortable enough to pray, right? My friend Victoria like sat with me for hours after a breakup. Willie and Mike were evidence that you could be really, really smart and still believe in Jesus, which was like, that was good for me to experience. Birch modeled the freedom and the beauty that comes from confessing sin, right? That weird community helped me become a disciple of Jesus. And I don't know if I would be doing ministry today if it wasn't for hanging out with them, right? Like, I'm so glad that I chose to hang out with people that did not give me a spark, right? And that actually might be one of the more convicting things that I'll say tonight, because if I'm honest, I think probably one of the biggest hurdles for people, for us to form community is our own selfishness, right? That we're willing to be friends with certain people, that we feel entitled to a certain caliber of friend, and we aren't really willing to put ourselves out there for normal people that are actually in our lives. Maybe that sounds harsh, but really I think we're losing out on some pretty sweet connections with people because we're selfish about who we're willing to spend our time with. And when we actually get past our prejudices, my experience is that everybody has something pretty lovable about them if I actually get to know them, right? Yeah. So unfortunately, that's not the only reason why I think that community is really hard for us. So what are some other reasons as you reflect on your experience with community? Let's talk about, like, what are some other reasons why it's hard to engage in community? Just throw out some ideas. There's no wrong answer, clearly.
I think it kind of goes with that, or it's kind of what you're saying, but in my words, it's like perfect community,
Yes.
like getting so stuck up or caught up in finding the perfect crew.
The perfect, yeah, the idealistic community. Totally. I actually have a quote that I put on the paper that is about that. Yeah, I've seen so many people do this, by the way. Okay, so I wrote it, I typed it up and put it on the paper because it's very long. I'm going to read it. So this is by Dietrich Bonhoeffer in his book, Life Together. The sooner this shock of disillusionment, and that what he means by that, because we're coming in, is that the community of Jesus is still messy and it's full of sinful people and sometimes hurtful and it's hard to love, or people don't care about you in the best ways all the time. So the sooner this shock of disillusionment comes to an individual and to a community, the better for both. Every human wish dream that is injected into the Christian community is a hindrance to genuine community and must be banished if genuine community is to survive. He who loves the dream of community more than the community itself becomes the destroyer of the latter. Even if their personal intentions may be ever so honest and earnest and sacrificial, the man who fashions a visionary ideal of community demands that it must be realized by God, by others, and by himself. He enters the community of Christians with his demands, sets up his own law, and judges the brethren and God and himself accordingly. That's an intense quote. So, so what do you guys think about that?
It makes sense because if we're constantly dreaming for something that's not happening, it's an easy way to ignore maybe where God has us for a reason.
Totally.
Yeah.
What else? Have any of you been in that space?
Oh yeah. Like that's why sometimes I lead us in a way that's kind of desperate and like.
Wait, you lead?
Yeah, like do something exciting. I was like,
oh,
and it didn't come from a bad place, but it was like, we gotta do stuff. Like we need to do more stuff. Like we're not what we should be. You know what I mean? Yeah, I bum myself out so much thinking like, what does a church need to look like, and having some visionary dream out in the forest that I can never find, instead of loving what's right here in front of me.
yeah, and we're really kind of in effect assuming that we know what should happen, or that we have the perspective on the community and what is ideal, right? Instead of thinking, well, maybe Jesus actually wants me in something else, or like maybe Jesus' perspective is different, and just like trusting the Holy Spirit, right? That like this, like what is in front of me, this thing, that God is real and active and moving here. And so I can trust it instead of trying to force something, right? Some ideal.
Yeah.
I think there's an aspect where, I mean, even kind of doing church in the backyard, like there's something about Christian community where we had a bad experience in this type of mode with people. And it's like, well, that's the problem. So I'm going to go do it over
Yeah.
here. If I was in charge, it wouldn't be, we wouldn't have all those problems. Or if we did it my way, if we did it this way, there's always this other. It's kind of the grass is always greener.
Yes.
Else.
Mm-hmm.
Which Caleb, actually, you told me the parable that I've shared with some of you about, like the old man who's sitting outside the town.
Yeah.
And like someone walks out from the previous town and was like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited to be this new town. What is it like? And the old man who's sitting outside the town asks him, well, what was your old town like? And he goes, oh, it was terrible. I hated everyone. It was the worst thing ever. And the old man goes, oh yeah, you're going to hate this town.
Yeah.
The same thing happened to the good person coming in. So just the reality of, I think obviously there's different pains and different struggles, and different communities bring things on themselves, obviously, but I think I often struggle with. Well, we could just, get it right, then all sin would be gone in the communities. I wouldn't be hurt. It'd be easier for me to be myself, and I could just have the right dynamics. Then I feel safe. Then finally I'll commit. But I'm not going to commit until all these parameters are in place.
Yeah, totally.
Tendency to go, I like community, but I don't want this.
Sorry, I like community, but I don't want to.
Don't want it messy.
Okay. Oh, don't want it messy.
So what we end up doing is, okay, this person came forward with a problem, so let's go find a place for him to get fixed. Because I don't want to get that in my life. So it's like, we want the, you used the best word, we want connectivity, but we really don't want community.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because community requires some stuff. Totally.
That's almost, I see what Jesus was doing. This group of men it's messy.
Yeah.
And it's not, they're going to each all have their own agendas, and
yeah.
You got to figure out what you're going to sacrifice for that other person. Are you going to get up at 2 in the morning and make the trip down to Seattle because this person said, I'm in pain? We don't want that part of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And what community doesn't have that actually when you really get into it, right? Yeah. Yeah, we've had a lot of, I have had a lot of friends that have just bounced around from church to church because they want this ideal thing that just does not exist. It just doesn't, right? And so they're never that invested and they're always feeling dissatisfied.
And communities can go off the rails and be oppressive and abusive.
Yes,
and
of course. There are times that it's appropriate to leave. But when it's just, again, where it's centered around what am I getting out of it? Are all of my needs and desires being met? Do I not want to actually engage with the messy or the real? Then are we actually missing out on something special that Jesus wants us to move through, right? Or grow in?
Yeah, I think that one of the best choices I made in my life was not leaving a community that was pointing out a lot of my problems.
Yeah.
So we need to start pointing out your problems.
Oh.
Honestly, I am kind of that way. I love it. Well,
Okay. So idealism, right? We will never find the perfect thing because we're dysfunctional. Everyone else is sinful and dysfunctional. We need to throw away our idealisms and just actually ask Jesus, where do you want me? And I will trust that you will place me in the place that you want me, right? Yeah. What else? What are other hindrances to community? Maybe even thinking about Seattle or just our culture.
Work.
Oh yeah.
It's tiring.
Oh my God, yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. How many people work? I feel like now, most people work. At least 40 hours. I don't know if that was. I don't know what back in the day, but.
Yeah, community sometimes requires us to give up some stuff, right? Or sacrifice some stuff. And honestly, I was thinking this was one of the ones that I had down. I think we don't want to do that because we really like our autonomy and our independence, right? I don't know if this is maybe kind of connected to the work thing, but we just really don't want to give up stuff unless we want to. We just really like our independence and being able to do what we want to do or live the life the way that we need to do it. I guess with work, it can just be I need to learn to step back and set better boundaries. But yeah, there's this whole thing about autonomy that we just need to let go of, right? Because to show up every Sunday or every other Wednesday, it just requires us to let go of some of the FOMO that we always have, right? Or what if there's something else better? Or what if I just feel really tired and I don't feel like it? What if it's just the most awesome weather and I want to like go do something on Lake Washington? Like, if we want real community, we do have to like commit, right? And the disciples, they had to leave everything and join Jesus. And so sometimes it means that if we want community, we have to be willing to give up some of our autonomy, which is really countercultural. That we can't just do whatever we want whenever we want. And we have to give some of our desires up and freedoms for the sake of love, right? Any other barriers to community?
I feel like the fear of being known,
Mm-hmm.
fully known, it's so much easier
Totally.
to be like, I don't trust community or people or God enough to let them in and like see the broken pieces. So,
Totally.
I mean, I'm definitely guilty of that. Like, I get to know people and like they know the good parts of me, but like I start coming more and there's more opportunity for them to know the not as great parts of me. So I'm like, maybe I just shouldn't go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, does that resonate with other people? Yeah, I think that we're very, very scared of vulnerability, right? And so many of us hover in this middle place of like pseudo community where we come to church or we have some Christian friends and maybe we even show up to ladies' night or man, I hate calling it ladies' night. We need to come up with a better name.
Can you call it a lady group?
That sounds lame too. Ladies' night. I kind of like ladies' night better than ladies' group. Anyway, man night. We hold back like a core of who we are, right? And I think that this is like because subconsciously we believe that if we were really to engage, kind of like you're saying, if we're really to engage a community, then our real selves are going to be exposed. And we're like, crap, like, I don't know if I want that, right? And because we're not only our best people with people that we love the most, right? Like, we're not always our best. We are also at our worst. If you were to follow me around tomorrow, even, my worst moments will likely be they will likely revolve around the things that I say to Caleb or my children or the actions that I take towards them, right? Even when Kenny and Kyle started living with us, we were like, just so you know, you might hear us fighting, which I'm sure I don't even want to know. Okay, well, that happens. It's the people that we love the most, right? And it's because I'm safe with them, right? It's not because I'm my worst self when I'm with them. It's because I'm like my real self. And so they see all of it. Just the other day, we dropped Clementine off at school. And because it's COVID, all the kids have to like line up outside of the school and get checked in by a handful of adults. And so as we pull up, I'm angry about something. And so and because I'm with my family and I'm like feeling like I'm in my safe element or whatever, I forget about all the people outside and I get out of the car, or as I'm getting out of the car, I like slam the door and I'm like, I'm so angry right now. Like probably that loud, right? Probably did I say a bad word too?
Yeah,
And I slam the door. And so now the whole school knows about my anger problems, right? Like Kayla was even like, I hope you're happy or something.
I wrote that in real good.
I didn't even care in the moment. I was so riled up. That is why most of us are scared of intimacy, right? Because we know that who we actually are is going to come out unfiltered. And there's this fear that people are going to see it and they're going to reject us, right? But that's like the path to growth, right? The way to become people of love. Like we mess up and then we get to ask for forgiveness. We get to experience grace. People call us out and then we recognize with the help, lovingly call us out. And then we recognize with the help of Jesus that we do want to change, that that's not the way we want to be, right? And gradually, day by day, we transform. Scott Peck, who wrote The Road Less Traveled, he argued that the two most important components of healthy, transformative community is vulnerability and accountability. So there can't be community without vulnerability, And vulnerability is risky because we might finally share and then we might experience criticism, or someone's going to want to try to fix us. Sometimes we don't want to be held accountable, right? We don't want to change because we don't want to change. And David Brooks, he's a New York columnist writer. He wrote, he defined community as love-drenched accountability. So if all we have is vulnerability, like if we totally feel safe to like lay ourselves bare, and then we're gonna like, there's love and there's compassion, but there's no accountability. If there's no community that's lovingly calling us to a more faithful way of following Jesus, then there's no change, right? And if we only have accountability but no vulnerability, like, oh, you looked at porn, now you have to come meet with me at 6 a.m. every morning, and you need to fast from the internet for 2 weeks. And that's all we talk about. And then it just can lead you into inner shame, right? And unrealistic expectations. If there's no loving vulnerability, like, hey, you're not alone. Like, I struggle also. Here's how I struggle. Like, if we're selective in what we share, if we don't actually go to the scary places of brokenness inside of us, then we don't change. And I want to change, right? Like, I want to become more like Jesus. So we need vulnerability and we need accountability. And that's why the focal point for Jesus's community wasn't in a crowded temple or in an amphitheater where you could be anonymous. It was around the table, right? It was a table of 12 disciples and a handful of others. And that was his primary way of forming community. And that's why people can consistently come to church and feel lonely, or people can have good Christian friends and feel lonely, right? It's because we only share our shiny parts and we don't share our messiness. Like, the greatest intimacy always comes from our deepest vulnerability. The times in my life when I felt the most loved and seen and close to people is when I have shared the scariest things for me to share. And so it means that we have to be willing to share our dark thoughts. It means we have to talk about things that feel scary to us. Maybe it's our finances or various addictions or the deep unmet desires, or it's our self-hatred or whatever it is. I think an area of my life that's felt tender lately is aging. Like, I've relied on my appearance for so long, which might sound weird. On the best days, I feel like I use my appearance to like woo people into community, to build trust, to make people feel comfortable. And on the worst days, I feel like sometimes I use my appearance or try to look a certain way to make myself feel better, which is really over against other people, right? And it's kind of embarrassing to talk about because I don't want you guys to think I'm like vain or appearance focused, but maybe I am a little bit, right? And I'm also deeply self-conscious. And so what am I gonna do as my appearance gets, I don't know, as I age? And will people be less interested in me or what I have to say? And where am I going to place my sense of value and self-worth, right? Like, I need community to help me walk through the mess of that. It's the tender place of vulnerability where the growth happens, right? Community pushes us against our individualism and our idealism, and it's intimidating and it requires vulnerability, but it's, for some reason, it's the main arena in which Jesus teaches us how to love, right? Your family and your community, it's the training ground for love, right? Our closest relationships, which are the hardest relationships, they're the training ground for us to learn how to love and to feel love. Yeah, so I encourage us to step towards vulnerability. Come to Wednesday nights, to ladies group, hang out with one another, take relational risks, even small ones. And you're all welcome to be part of this, like, of Open Home, which I want it to be this imperfect, messy community, right? Where people are seen and prayed for, and feel the love of Jesus and are, challenged to transform in beautiful ways. So I'm going to pray for us, and I'm going to have a reflection on the whiteboard, and then we're going to get into groups of, 3 or 4, and kind of talk about what came up for us as we were reflecting on the questions. Jesus, there's so much that we could talk about with community. But I want to be part of a community where I am pushed to love more, to be more honest and vulnerable. Because we want more opportunities to actually feel your grace, Jesus. And I think that does come when we actually take time to be real with one another and hear people speak words of you, like, over us. I pray that you would bring up some of our personal barriers to community. Just show us what those are, Jesus. And then, okay, I'm going to pray. I'll pray for us. I'll do a little listening prayer thing right now. So, I just invite you, Jesus, to speak to us. And as we think about community, I pray that you would be shining kind of a light on our hearts. What is the thing that feels most scary to us? Maybe it is control, like not wanting to change or not wanting to give up private time. Maybe it is that we're just overloaded and we have like a ton of work or a ton of commitments, and just show us if we need to like let something drop, Jesus, and cut back. Maybe it is like fear of being fully seen, just like all the real parts of us. That maybe it's this, we have this feeling that if someone was to actually really see us, they would not like us. If that's true, Jesus, if some of us are wrestling with that, like, wow, if someone was to actually really see all the really gross parts of me, like, they would not like me. Jesus, what do you want to say? Like, what is your perspective? Maybe some of us, it's idealism, and we just have like an unrealistic expectation of Christian community. Just bring to mind the things that hold us back, Jesus. And now I pray that you would just give us an image of what our life could look like if we more fully embraced community. Like, how would that feel in our heart, in our mind? I pray that you would grow the desire in us to be more fully known, to live our life out with other people that love you. Jesus, and what's the next step that you're inviting us into in regards to community? With the barriers, Jesus, I just pray that you would help us to visualize whatever that is. I pray that you would just like smack it away, like get it out of the way. Yeah, because this city needs more of Jesus community. Real, beautiful Jesus community would be so compelling here and would be so good. So we just ask for more of it, Jesus. Because we want to bring other people into the community. Like we want to be fishers of men that bring more people in. And we want to grow and we want to transform and become more like you. And Jesus, maybe some of us feel like we will never be really part of a community, and I just pray that you would like knock away that lie too. Thank you that you love us. Thank you that we are lovable, and I pray that you would help us to feel that. Yeah, that you want us to have the freedom to be fully ourselves with other people. And if there's anything else that you want to say to us, I just pray that you would do that now, either like a word or an image or maybe a verse or whatever, maybe a feeling, whatever it is. If there's something that you have for each of us, I just pray that you would do that. Silence our thoughts and just speak to us, Jesus. Pray this in your name. Amen. So feel free to get into groups of 3 or 4 and you can just share if there was something that you're thinking about or something that came up for you. But this is the question that I had. So we can talk about this or whatever.